Welcome to day 4 of Shadowhunters month, and if you've clicked on this video because you've seen the title and you want to attack me, let's just all relax, let's be calm. This is not meant to be a hateful thing, this is just an open discussion, and this is a list of 5 things that the books did better than the show, Shadowhunters. But before anyone gets angry, it is going to be fair, because there will be a video of 5 things the show did better than the books, okay? So, it'll be fine, you know, I'm balancing it out, and this isn't an attack on the show, because if you know me, you know how much I love it, and you also know how much I love the books. And yeah, for everything I didn't like what the show did in terms of adapting the books, there are things that I preferred. So, you know, it's a give and take, but before anyone gets angry, there will be a video about things that the show did better than the books, so don't worry. And bearing all that in mind, I actually found both of these, like, 5 things so-and-so did better than the other thing. I found both of these videos and both of these lists really actually hard to come up with things. I thought it'd be an interesting idea, and I thought I'd have like loads of things off the top of my head, but I really had to think about them. And just because there are things, you know, featured on this list, doesn't mean I don't like them in the show. It just means I prefer the way the books handled it, and vice versa for the other video when that comes. So yeah, this is just a friendly discussion, it's not an attack. If you love something, I think you should accept that it has faults and flaws and things to improve, because nothing's perfect. And that's what this video is, and because I love Shadowhunters so much, I'm pointing out things I would have done to improve it. So, without further ado, these are my top 5 things that the books did better than the show. So just bear in mind, these are all my personal opinions, you can agree, you can disagree, and obviously spoilers for the show and for the books. If you're nervous about book spoilers because you've only seen the show, I wouldn't worry too much, because most of the things in this list have already been done in the show, or will probably never be done in the show. So I think you should be safe, but if you're too wary of spoilers, then maybe come back to this video at another time. So at number 5 on the list, it's Izzy's story arcs. This could be a controversial one. I love Izzy in the show, obviously, but I think sometimes there have been missteps in her storylines, mainly in season 2. Because when we're going to look back at the show as a whole, she's going to have more screen time dedicated to her romance with Raphael, which isn't even a thing in the books, than a romance with Simon, which is just nuts to me. They did always kind of act like the show was going to go on and on, so I thought they really did take their time with the slow burn. Now it's just so frustrating because we're not going to get as much development as we would have liked in Izzy's relationships. But yeah, that's not kind of the main focus of this particular point in this list. But yeah, my main criticism of Izzy's storylines for the show was the majority of season 2 with her yin-fen addiction, which, you know, is completely made up just for the show. And I just feel like the things that Izzy did in the books were maybe not better, but for me more interesting and more in keeping with her character. There was something about this whole yin-fen addiction storyline just didn't sit right with me, because it had been done in the books with a different character, in a way. And I think it just went on a bit too long. I understand what they were trying to do with it, you know, see kind of Izzy at her weakest and then see her kind of get better and become stronger than ever. I just felt they glossed over her recovering and really dragged out the addiction side of things. and it just wasn't a storyline I was drawn to, as opposed to other things that were going on. I liked what they did with her in season 1, and I'm loving what they've done with her in season 3 so far, except for, I suppose, the stuff with Charlie. I would have just, like, nope, bye. So there's that as well. But my main criticism of Izzy's story arcs in the show was the whole Yin Fen thing in season 2. Just for me, I wasn't a fan of it. Obviously, people will disagree with that, and that's absolutely fine. But I kind of preferred what they had her do in the books. And it's not like she had like a huge storyline of her own in the books a lot of the time. But I still just preferred her role in the books to mainly season 2 of the show. At number 4 on the list, it's Maureen, or the show's treatment of Maureen. It's funny because this could have been something I preferred about the show. So obviously this is going to be kind of a book spoiler, but it's never going to happen in the show, so if you're not worried about book spoilers, you should be alright. But in season 1 of the show, we met Maureen, who was in Simon's band. They slept together at some point in season 1, and then he kind of just, bye Maureen, and we never really saw her again. Whereas in the books, she's not actually in the band. She's quite a young girl who's got a crush on Simon, and she's a huge fan of the band. Then she gets killed and turned into a vampire, and then she's kind of a secondary antagonist for the second half of the Mortal Instruments series. Has a lot of interactions with Maya, actually, near the end of the Mortal Instruments. And when I read that in the books, I wasn't big on having like a little girl vampire as an antagonist. I just couldn't really take it very seriously. So when Maureen in the show was the same age as like Simon and Clary, I thought, oh, so if they go with this direction with her and this same story with her in the books for the show, I'll probably be able to take that storyline a lot more seriously, because it will be not a little girl vampire, which I kind of found the idea kind of weird. But then they did what they did with Maureen and just got rid of her after season 1. And they kind of brought in Heidi in season 2 and 3 to play a similar role to what Maureen would have done if they'd stuck to kind of the book storyline for her. So they had this potential for the way they handled Maureen in the show to be better than the way the books did it for me. But instead they kind of threw that away after season 1. And I did find Maureen quite an interesting character, and it's more of wasted potential, I think, for the show to have not gone through with that story, especially since they basically just did it with Heidi anyway. It seems kind of strange. But yeah, that just meant overall I preferred the Maureen story in the books, even though she was a little girl, because the show started that story and had a really interesting setup for it, and then just didn't follow it through. Number 3 on the list of something the books did better than the show. Oh, don't hate me, it's not an attack, but number 3 for me is Jace. I really like Jace in the show. I think Dominic Sherwood is fantastic in the part, and overall I've been very happy with Jace's portrayal in the show. I just think, well, personally I prefer Jace in the books. He's a bit more sassy and sarcastic. He's a lot funnier in the books than the show, and I feel like the show kind of skipped over the lightheartedness of the character, and just had all these miserable things happen to him, but he never really joked about it, never really smiled and had a good time. Whereas in the books, we've seen him do that, and I think that was a lot more endearing as a character trait, to see Jace in the books go through all that similar pain that he did in the show, but put on a brave face and put on a smile and a show for it, which is kind of a classic Herondale trait. Whereas the show kind of took it in just a more bleak direction, and he's had a few like quips, mainly at Simon's expense, and a few jokes here and there. And a lot of the time he's like that with everyone. But the show hasn't really captured that. That's kind of the main difference for me. So I just found that quality in Jace more endearing in the books, and something I wish the show did a lot more. But that's the sole reason why I prefer book Jace to show Jace. So my top 2 for this list, I kept chopping and changing and swapping them out, which order they went in. But in the end, I settled for number 2 on my list of things the show did better than the books, was keeping Jocelyn alive. For me, this has always been one of the show's biggest missteps in deciding to kill off Jocelyn. I understand they tried to, move Clary's story along by killing her off. But at the same time, it lost so many interesting stories and so many interesting scenes in the books. It kind of destroyed any chance of them happening in the show. And there was always a scene between Jocelyn and Sebastian, or Jonathan, from the final book of the Mortal Instruments that I wanted to see in the show, but killing Jocelyn kind of took that away, and I feel like it just closed more doors than it opened in terms of stories. I thought for a long time it was kind of the biggest misstep the show made in terms of storylines adapting the books, but I then decided the other one I think was a bit more. But yeah, I will always be a bit annoyed that they killed off Jocelyn. And it was just something that still to the... oh, I just coughed. I've still got a really bad cold, sorry. But it's just something that I kind of always be low-key salty about. But overall, the absence of Jocelyn didn't have as great of an impact on the characters as what number 1 on my list would have done. So that's why I kind of decided to put this in second place instead of first. So yeah, not happy that they decided to kill Jocelyn off in the show, because they did a lot of interesting stuff with Jocelyn in the books. So that's why that's on this list. So number 1 in my list of things that the books did better than the show was killing Max. I'm sure a lot of people know, whether they've just seen the show or not, that Max dies in the books, and at this point in the show he should have died. They had the perfect setup for it in the show when Max discovers that Sebastian is actually Jonathan. Then they had that kind of scuffle where Sebastian kind of smacked Max's head on the desk or something, I think, and that was the perfect moment to have killed off Max, because that's similar kind of thing to what happens in the books. And in the books it has this huge impact, obviously, on the Lightwoods and Jace, because they lose their little brother, and it just raises the stakes so much. It kind of truly solidifies Jonathan or Sebastian as this proper villain, and you're like, whoa, the stakes are real now, because they killed off this like 9-year-old boy. Really dark moment. It kind of kicks off a really deep connection between Sam and Isabel. It just changes Alec and Izzy and, Robert and Maris forever. And Max's death left a huge impact through the rest of the Mortal Instruments and beyond. I don't really want to go into too many spoilers. But Max's death certainly affects Malik's future in a way. And the fact that they kept Max alive in that scuffle in like season 2 episode 18 or something, it was around then, when they had the perfect opportunity to kill him, they kept him alive, and it just kind of robbed us of this amazing character development and probably some stunning performances from the actors in those scenes. So I would have loved to have seen that reaction. Obviously I'm not wishing for a 9-year-old boy to die, but it was such a huge death in the books and such a huge moment, and like massive in terms of character development and moving the story along. It does make me sad that the show decided not to go in that route, and I'd have been okay with that decision if they'd maybe taken Max in a new direction and done an interesting story with him. But after that, he went off to recover, and I still don't think we've seen him again since. So they might as well have just killed him. So it just seems weird. I mean, I'm pretty sure he will be in 3B. I'm pretty sure he shows up. But the fact that they had the chance to kill him like in the books, they didn't, and still did nothing with him anyway, seems kind of strange. And because it robbed us of so much amazing character development and so much amazing storytelling, I feel like in terms of telling a story, killing Max in the books was a lot better than the direction they took in the show. I mean, for all I know, it could be like a behind the scenes thing, and maybe Freeform didn't want to kill off a child in their show or something like that. It could easily have been like that and the writer's hands were tied or whatever, but still, it's such a huge moment in the Shadowhunters verse. It's just a shame that the show never got to explore that story. So those are my 5 things that the books did better than the show. Like I said earlier, it's not an attack on the show, I still love it. These are just 5 things that I feel were a bit better in the books. And it's because a couple of those, the show had a great setup to execute those stories and then just didn't. And that's what hurts them most. And obviously, there will be a video at some point in Shadowhunters month that is 5 things the show did better than the books. So it's all okay. And yeah, please don't hate me. And obviously you can disagree with my list. I don't blame you if you do. You may like some of the directions the show took, and that's absolutely fine. Or you could agree, which is always nice. But yeah, it's an interesting kind of discussion to have in terms of like adaptations and stuff. Obviously lots of adaptations of things will change a lot up from the source material. That's kind of the way it is. But it's not always a good thing. So that was why I kind of wanted to put this video out there. But yeah, that was my top 5 things, and there will be more videos in this vein coming throughout Shadowhunters month, so hopefully you can look forward to those. And yeah, until tomorrow for a new video, thanks for watching.